Alright, now continuing on with performing events and events and operations, we want to play cards and then resolve those cards using the map board. Operations within Twilight Struggle include placing influence, performing realignment rolls, doing coup attempts, playing cards to the space race, and dice rolling for specific events and cards. So we'll go back to the map board, and I'm continuing on with the same spreadsheet we used before for our previous presentation in regards to playing cards. I will look at the card hand here, and now we need to make a decision for the first action round what card we want to play. We can see that under played cards for the particular headline section, we've already put those cards into place, and now we're on to the first action round. So going back into the card hand, let's figure out a card that we want to play. Let's use the Korean War. I will click the card hand button. Again, you can enter the number in manually into the played cards worksheet if you want, but it's just a lot easier to play it from the card hand. Of course, if you're playing with an external card tracking system or a sit-down game, you would have to enter it manually. I'll click that card and it will say yes, and away we go. So now at this point I've played the card, but unlike the headline phase, I need to actually specify whether I'm playing this card's event or operations. In this case, I want to play the card's event. I can do that by clicking the events field beside the card and selecting either yes or no. This will automatically populate that we are not playing it for operations, and then we can go and resolve the card. Alternatively, I could click yes on this field for the operations, and that would indicate we're not playing it as an event. For the sake of demonstration, I will perform the ops here, and then we'll move on to performing events with the card using both the Korean War card for examples. So under operations, once we've selected operations, we need to select the type of operations. We would then click this field and we would select from either influence, realignment roll, or coup attempt. In the case of an event such as the captured scientist or other events that require you to move up on the space race, this field is where you would enter in the number of spaces that you would move up on the space race. If I had entered 1 here, it would automatically populate the type of ops as space race and then prompt me to add the victory points to the track for that particular area of the track. I'm going to say no, and I'm going to actually delete this. So again, we'll go back in here and select, we'll say influence. Just as it should be fairly straightforward looking at the short form of these, but if you're not sure, you can look up here, which has a little bit of a reference. So at this point we've indicated we want to play this for operations, and the type of operations is influence. I'll go back to the map board and I'll explain influence. So as you know, with Twilight Struggle, each particular country in a region has a left and right box to denote the influence for either the US player or the USSR player respectively. So for the example of West Germany, if I wanted to enter 4 in here, for the US side I would do so. Again, for the US side I would just go ahead and I could add influence there as well. Now, having said that, any influence added into the spreadsheet by default is immediately added to what is already existing in there. So for an example, with West Germany, if I put 1 in here, it would add it to the 2 that is already in that box, and it would total 3. There we go, there's a demonstration. However, if you don't like that, where it automatically adds it for you, you can uncheck this option called Add Influence Mode. By unchecking that and indicating I do want to disable it, now anytime I enter a number into that box, it won't add it but just simply overwrite it. So in that case, that's what's happened. I'll make sure that it is enabled for the purposes of this demonstration. Alright, so adding influence, it's that simple to add it directly to the map board. Typically you would add influence to the map board directly when you're instructed to by an event. However, if you're performing operations, it might be best to use the Place Influence box that's situated in the bottom left corner of the map board. Now I'm just going to choose an example here as the US. We played a card here, Korean War, for operations. It has a 2 ops value. That value is automatically added to the operations section here. that we can use to place influence. So for this example, let's say I wanted to place some influence into Iran. By selecting the country here, it'll automatically populate the influence for both super parties. Also, this box indicates the particular superpower that will be adding the influence. We could change this, but it does automatically, depending on the card that's played for a particular player, fill in this for you. So in this case, I have two operations I can use to add influence to this country. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's add 2 influence. When I do that, it will indicate as such in the right box, and then I would click the update button. However, as a result of the rules of Twilight Struggle, if you are adding influence to a country that does not have an adjacent country that does not have adjacent influence in it, you can't add that influence. For example, let's look at Italy. Because there's no countries surrounding Italy that have influence, if I were to attempt to add USSR influence to that country, that would be breaking the rules of Twilight Struggle. This is also indicated by an exclamation mark just below the update button. Therefore, if I attempted to add 2 influence to Italy and click the update button, it would not permit me to do this because that would break the rules of the game. The spreadsheet is very good at tracking events and other restrictions and preventing you from doing them during play. This is a good way to learn the ins and outs of the game. We'll go back to our example of Iran, and I will click 2 in there, and I will click update. Now it's added it to Iran. I'll click OK, and we'll notice it's used up our 2 operations, and when we look at the map board, it's added it to Iran. So there's an example of adding influence or placing influence to the map board. Having said that, there are some rules about adding influence to countries that are controlled. In this case, I'm going to actually remove this USSR influence, and I can actually enter a negative number to remove influence. And now that indicates that the US has control of West Germany. I'm going to attempt to place influence into West Germany. I will select West Germany. Now, because I've already played the card, it's eliminated my ops there. I'm just going to go ahead and delete the card, which says it's not in my card hand right now. I'm just going to disable card management for now to get around that, so I can enter the card here. Alright, let's go and indicate our ops and the type, which was influence. Going back to the map board now, I can certainly add influence to West Germany, but because of the rules of Twilight Struggle, it requires me to use 2 op points to add 1 influence to a country that's controlled. So in this case, I have 2 ops, which would permit me to only add 1 influence to West Germany, USSR influence. This is actually taken care of again using the place influence box. So therefore I highly recommend you use the place influence when adding influence to countries using operations. When I select 2 for USSR, it automatically adds the 1. I will click update, and now we show that West Germany has 1 USSR influence. Next, let's go back and select realignment roles. I'll click the map board, and we have another section here for performing realignment roles. Let's go back to Iran as our example. Now I'm going to mess around a bit here with Iran, and being that I'm the USSR player, I'm going to create a couple countries that have an influence adjacent to it, which could affect the realignment role. So now we see that the realignment roles has been updated to automatically modify our die rolls based on having 2 countries that are adjacent control and also having influence. So this also keeps track of all that for you. In this case, it's showing in the middle box that before we even roll the dice, the USSR has a 3 modifier advantage on the die roll. One thing I didn't demonstrate is the modifiers. During the game, there are certain cards that may apply modifiers. In the case of influence, if a card is in effect, it will automatically add the modifier for a particular player's turn. You can also add them individually. In this case, it would bump up the value of the either the operations or attempts that a player would have to perform. In the case of the Korean War,